What is going on, and welcome to another episode of the Time Killers Podcast, a show about the games, movies, and everything we kill time with. My name is Neil Rivera, and I'm once again killing time with a man I have spent too much time with inside of this Trojan horse. It's Matthew Field.
Let's just hope we don't get stabbed through the top of the horse.
Yeah, I mean, even before that, like, we've got a whole other issues, man. We're just kind of like sitting in each other's fluids. I don't actually want to picture us in that scenario.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about The Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. It's kind of all the rage at the box office. I guess one of two movies that is all the rage at the box office. We've both seen it. We're going to deep dive, do a full spoiler cast of the 3,000-year-old epic poem that's been readapted for the big screen here. We're also going to be talking about Beast of Reincarnation, the latest game from Game Freak, the creators of Pokémon. And I've also been heads down playing Fields of Mistria now that it's in a full 1.0 release. But before we jump into all of that, we want to remind you guys that you can listen to past episodes and find us on your social network of choice at timekillerspod.com. While you're over there, send us your hottest takes and let us know whatever you're killing time with at ask.timekillerspod.com. And if you're listening to us here on a podcast service, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Every little bit helps get us a little bit more noticed by more people. We appreciate it. All right, Matthew, let's talk The Odyssey. Of course, like I said, the 3,000-year-old epic poem written by Homer. We all had to read it at some point in our high school careers, but Christopher Nolan has done the impossible and made it compelling. I said it. I did it. So this came out. It's been out for just almost, we're going on a month now at the time of this recording. It came out on July 17th. To date, it has made $1.1 billion against a $250 million budget. It's Christopher Nolan's highest grossing film to date. So all that to say that it's doing really, really well. I don't think anyone expected it to not do well because, just given Christopher Nolan coming off of an Academy Award and Oppenheimer, the follow-up to that, this is obviously just being a little bit more of a straightforward action-oriented movie. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Like I said, full spoilers here, but for those of you who aren't aware or familiar with the Odyssey, just a quick recap here. We are following Odysseus, who is a soldier in the Trojan War. He's really the king of Ithaca. So he's, in charge of a battalion of men here, conscripted to go fight off in the Trojan War. And so he, inevitably hatches the Trojan horse scheme that is sort of famous, where a bunch of Greek soldiers sneak into the horse. They all, they treat the horse itself as a gift, and sneak inside the fortress, break out in the dead of night and kill everyone. Then the rest of the movie is essentially about Odysseus's journey home, right? So after the war is sort of won, everyone starts making their way home. In Odysseus's case, however, he runs into all manner of fantastical and wartime issues that prevent him from getting home to his wife and family and kingdom. Meanwhile, there's a group of suitors who have returned or have come to Ithaca who are looking for Penelope, who's the wife of Odysseus's hand in marriage. There's the throne, I guess the status of Odysseus's throne is in limbo because he's not home, but he hasn't been officially declared dead yet. So all these suitors are lined up, like waiting for confirmation that Odysseus is dead so that they can lay their claim to the throne of Ithaca. So while Odysseus is trying to make this sort of epic return back to his home, you also have this sort of brooding Game of Thrones-esque game of like trying to appease the suitors, and there's a lot of political drama and intrigue going on in the background. So of course everything sort of comes to a head here at the end. Odysseus makes his way inevitably to Ithaca after going through a bunch of different trials and tribulations, and inevitably takes on all of the suitors head on to defend his throne, defend his honor, and sort of reclaim his title as King of Ithaca. So all that being said, just getting into sort of like top level thoughts here, Matthew, how did you feel about the movie overall?
I loved it. I thought that, you know, in hindsight, I think it was foolish to ever doubt Christopher Nolan here, but before this came out and before people actually saw it, there was some doubt whether he could actually tackle this source material. Even with Oppenheimer, and on all of his successes before, like the Odyssey was considered somewhat like untranslatable to film. Like it was, there was a reason why it hadn't been attempted at this scale for this long. And I think, really where this starts, like the most, maybe the most impressive part about this, it starts with the script for me and how judiciously they like cut the parts from the poem that didn't need to be there and kind of just really adapted it to modern times, and I think that's the part where like the whole caveat to this is that like if you're a diehard literature fan and like an ancient Greek historian, you probably don't like this movie a whole lot.
Yeah. There's probably a lot to nitpick.
Yeah. And so, but I think what's so like kind of brilliant about the way that he adapted it, again, for our time, even down to the way he emphasized like the law of Zeus and it being broken and that sort of thing. Like the Odyssey, the original poem itself was an adaptation from like verbal, oral history that had been passed down, like it was never the primary source to begin with. So this is a story that has been adapted once essentially into the written form. And now we have this modern visual form of it too, that has been adapted again, still retaining the same sort of core themes. And I just thought that it was kind of a brilliant symmetry of the way that, he felt comfortable adapting it to speak to our modern time while keeping the actual events of the movie the same.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I agree with you in that I loved this movie. It's up there with some of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies, and I agree with you also on the writing, and specifically for me, like I think this movie is paced phenomenally, right? Like it's pushing a 3 hour runtime, and it felt like they could have like kept going, and I would have been totally fine with it. I think it's just the way, and especially when you're trying to incorporate all of these different elements and all of these different stories, small stories, while also trying to paint the larger narrative. I think just the way that the movie was told, I think we can get into how he adapted it for modern times, specifically with the law of Zeus, right? Because that is a big theme of this movie, right? So, we talk about that Trojan horse opening, right? And the deeper you get into the movie, they replay that scene back and forth, and it really is made out to be like the main sort of theme of the movie is that the Trojan horse was this breaking of societal norm or like trust in society or the breaking of the social contract. And so yeah, like essentially what he's doing in retelling the Odyssey and with that focus of Zeus's law is sort of shining a light on ways in which the social contract is being broken in modern times today. So yeah, I agree with the writing, the script. I'm not a literary buff myself, so like I couldn't sit here and nitpick the things that were and weren't accurate, but I do think the ways in which that he adapted it made sense for the story that he was trying to tell.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, if we start looking beyond the screenplay, like, the next place that my mind goes is to the cast that he assembled here.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most star-studded casts that I think you probably could put in a film in 2026. Like, there's not many movie stars, like major movie stars that weren't in this in some capacity. And
it borders like on parody,
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, and I mean, I think I want to shout out Matt Damon because I mean, I think when you talk about people who can lead a cast like this, you can't go small with a star, right? Like you can't have some unknown playing it. And there's just simply not that many leading men in Hollywood who can carry this cast. Even a star like as big as Matt Damon, this would not have been a guarantee. Like this was not a slam dunk. But I think he did like a phenomenal job as the center of this movie, in a way that was like not his typical role. Like it was a little bit more, I want to say like a little more soulful. And
definitely more subdued.
yes. And I think, I mean, he nailed it. Like this probably is my favorite Matt Damon performance. Just because of how seriously he took the assignment and, really led the cast. And I thought he was incredible in just about every scene.
Yeah, I think there's also, going back to that, Zeus's law and how it applies to modern times and today. I think there's also something to be said about the foil between Matt Damon as Odysseus and Robert Pattinson as Antinous, especially at the end of the movie, right? Like, shit's hitting the fan. Everyone's, fighting, trying to kill Odysseus. Odysseus is, mowing these guys down one by one. And Antinous is like just barking orders from this like really like
Yes.
fearful, afraid position. And like you can really just get the sense of like he's a very cowardly person, where the entire movie we are shown that Matt Damon's take on Odysseus is just this very workman-like, does what needs to be done without complaining or saying any, like speaking up, and isn't afraid to get his hands dirty and help his crew out, like always has his crew top of mind. I think, like I said, the literary nerds will probably be picking this kind of stuff apart, but once again, like the ways in which Nolan adapted and sort of made Odysseus, this version of Odysseus, I think it does speak to a type of manhood and a type of manliness that we're missing in modern times, in the modern era, and I think Matt Damon embodied it perfectly.
Yeah, I think, Odysseus is not like, I mean, he's a complex character, I think. Like famously in the most modern translation, or the most famous modern translation of the Odyssey, it opens with the words like, "Tell me about a complicated man." And I mean, Odysseus is definitely that. And I think that really came through in the way, both how, he was written in this adaptation, of course, but also how Matt Damon kind of played him and portrayed him, and the trials and tribulations that he went through.
So we've been pretty glowing so far, and I think, for good reason, right? But is there anything that sort of jumps out to you that maybe didn't quite work or maybe missed the mark that especially compared with like some of Nolan's past works?
I mean, nothing large, honestly. Like this was pretty much, I'm not going to say flawless, but it was about as flawless as you can get a movie like this. I guess maybe tying into that complexity a little bit is that, some of the morality between, like the way, like I want to go to the end of the movie when he like mows down all the suitors, which is, if I recall correctly, in the original source text as well. Like, I think like the morality of like just killing all of them, I don't know if that fully aligns with the morality that has been that he's trying to regain. Like he's broken Zeus's law, and he's trying to repair that, essentially, or he's trying to atone for that. And I don't know if that fully brings it full circle in the same way. I'm not saying he should have been like, hey, let's chill here, And I don't know if there's a better way to resolve it, but I think if I'm going to nitpick something, I think that the incongruity between some of his actions and the morality that he preaches, and that the movie is clearly interested in conveying, there may be some nitpicks there in my mind. But again, this is an ancient Greek story. The morality system for the ancient Greeks is very different than what ours is today. So it may be a byproduct of that, but it was one of those things where I was like, like this is, it's just somewhere that my mind went when I was watching that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it took me a while to sort of adjust to the sort of like more quote unquote squeaky clean version of Odysseus, because he
Yes.
definitely is, I would say, more complicated and more complex in the original text, and different adaptations that I've seen and heard. So, but yeah, I mean, to go back to what you were saying, like, yeah, like it's, I wouldn't say it's flawless, but it really is like without any sort of major imperfections. I think this is a good point for me to shout out and talk about and gush about really the practical effects, and really
Yes.
just the level of, like, not really since Mad Max Fury Road have I seen practical effects done this well. I mean, just that whole fall of Troy sequence where you're just seeing these buildings fall down and everything, like just the way that they captured it, and just knowing that all of that stuff is practical is just really impressive. Obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Cyclops and how they used the giant puppet for him, and just made him look at like this super imposing and yet like grotesque monster. But yeah, the practical effects in this were just phenomenal. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I think, I mean, some of those scenes, like the Cyclops scene you mentioned, it makes me wonder what Christopher Nolan could do with like a horror movie, because
Oh yeah.
some of those scenes were scarier than than most horror movies. Like they were just terrifying with the way that they, and I think that does have something to do with the effects. You know, the fact that it's not CG. Like, you
Mhm.
know, it gives
Yeah,
me,
that pig sequence was gruesome, man.
yeah, and the scene with I'm gonna blank on the name, but when the huge like tentacles come out of the side of the mountain and are just ripping the people off the
Yes.
boat, like, man, that was terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, I would say, I was, searching for a superlative to give this, because it's definitely not my favorite Nolan movie, nor is it like I would say is his best movie. But I would say it's probably the most well-made Nolan movie, or like the most well-produced Nolan movie that I've watched. Just in terms of not only the practical effects, but the set design, the authenticity to ancient Greece. We can touch on the music and how for the score they recreated lutes and different instruments that were common in ancient Greece. So a lot of attention to detail, and I think the production for this was just off the charts. This is very much, I think, a movie when it comes Oscar time that not just the cast you're gonna see score nominations, but this is gonna be something for stage design and makeup and costuming, and like it's gonna be like, I think it's gonna challenge Lord of the Rings Return to the King for like most nominated. Hey guys, present day Neil here. I had a feeling as I was saying this that I was wrong to say that Lord of the Rings Return of the King was the most nominated movie in Oscar history, and turns out that I was wrong, but only because that Sinners recently dethroned it last year with 16 nominations. Just thought I'd give you guys that extra context. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, I think for sure, like the set design. I mean, the film, like the cinematography. I don't know if you saw. I think you saw this in IMAX as well, right?
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was spectacular in IMAX, and I'm sure it's still great in
It is, yeah.
in regular. I want to see it again. I just haven't been able to. But yeah, I mean, I think, in searching for a word to describe this, I think it's certainly his most like comprehensive film to date.
Yeah.
Like front to back, this is a full whole that he's created here. Like he created a universe, and then shot this movie in it essentially. So yeah, I would also agree that it's probably not my favorite. I may rank it. I don't know. It's so tough. I mean, I haven't seen some of his older ones in a while. I would say that I think my favorite is probably Memento, which is one of his early
Mhm.
ones.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but this could be like a second or possibly a third.
Yeah, I'm thinking like top 4, because I'm a sucker. Like, I think Inception is probably my favorite. I'm a sucker for that movie. And Interstellar now just hits harder now that I'm a dad. So those are like, and of course, like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Dark Knight. So I would say like that's a top 3, if I'm not ranking them. And then I would say this slots in at like a 4. Caveat that I haven't seen Oppenheimer. I haven't seen in some of his older stuff, and of course haven't seen some of the older stuff in a while. But yeah, like I think that lines up with how I'm feeling and sort of what the general consensus is, where it's really really well done movie. It's just, I mean, like it's one of those that I think it really shows like that art, like cinema and film still has some juice in terms of like an art form. It's not just YouTubers and it's not just streaming. Like there's still value in putting something in on film. And I think, you know, I'm glad we have a Christopher Nolan in our generation to keep proving that time and time again.
I agree. And this was certainly one where like I don't see many movies in theaters these days, but this was one where I like absolutely had to see it in theaters. Like I had to make
Yeah.
time to do that. Although I will say on the flip side of that, like when in terms of like saying, in terms of ranking these movies or determining like their overall lasting power, the reality is that most of them, like the movie is going to be seen more times at home than it is in a theater. Once its theatrical run ends, most people are going to be watching it at that point at home. So I'm hesitant to rank this until I see how it feels, like what the vibe is when you watch this at home. It's obviously a different feel. It's not as grand, but I think
Yeah.
there's something to be said for how a film, like how it plays, at home. So I'll hold off on my formal ranking until I see it like in my own house.
I'll sneak in one more jab because you mentioned the at-home viewing experience. I can only hope that the at-home viewing experience, they get the audio mix right, because like many other moviegoers, avid moviegoers that I follow have pointed out, the audio mix on this just wasn't great. It was really loud in parts, and then there were parts where you couldn't hear the dialogue because of all the loud background stuff that was happening. So that was like, you know, in terms of nitpicks. But yeah, I mean, in terms of you know, Nolan as a creator, right? Like I think he's sort of been on this interesting trajectory where, you know, he was kind of carving out this niche for doing just really bold narrative stuff that kind of had weird elements to it. And these last few movies that he's done have been more direct adaptation. So what do you think, you know, as someone who's followed Nolan and you know, watched his movies over the years, like what do you want to see him tackle next?
At this point, I mean, following up Oppenheimer and the Odyssey, he's got a blank check to do whatever
Yeah.
he wants to do at this point. Like if there's not going to be another point in his career where he has this kind of goodwill. I mean, it's sort of surprising that it was only now that he got a movie that with a budget this large. Um, but so he could do whatever he wants. I think I sort of think he will go. He won't go this big again, because he's talked a little bit about how grueling it was and how
Yeah.
difficult filming it was. So I kind of think he might play against the expectation there. For me personally, when you look back at the movies that he's done, I don't, he's not, he's done war movies. He's done, modern war movies, ancient war movies. He's done the biopic. He's done a bunch of sci-fi. What I think I would really like to see him is just like move into a genre that he hasn't done before. Like maybe do
Yeah.
like a modern Western or something like that.
Ooh.
Like I think he could crush a Western. But that's just me. I think he may go back small again. And
Yeah.
do something a little bit more, off the wall, which I would be fine with as well.
Yeah, the I mean, yeah, he's been pretty genre agnostic throughout his career
Yes.
for sure. And he's done, I mean, I think I like the horror shout out. I think after the Cersei scene in this, that like I think that's kind of, I would like to see him try a like a Cronenberg style horror
Yeah.
movie, you know, and really just sort of ratchet it up in terms of it wouldn't be appealing to me. Like that's like I'm pitching this movie and like I actively would not go see this in theaters, but I think just given what some of the elements that they did introduce in the Odyssey, I think that'd be really cool. I mean, if I am being selfish, I would say I want him to just try and tackle an original universe, right? Like get really crazy and just sort of, like what's a really cool unique world, like what's his version of Avatar, and just, give him a blank check to make that. I would like to see that. But yeah, given how intense filming and stuff was for the Odyssey, I can imagine not wanting to jump right into something that big and grand again. But I would like to see him, tackle with that level of grandiose, something like cool and original, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I would like to see him do that too. And I think he will eventually. It's just a matter of when. But yeah, I mean, for sure, all eyes will be on him to see what he does next.
So the Odyssey's big now, right? Like it's out, like it's kind of become like it's got this like pop culture cachet. Um, does this mean in your eyes that like, Greek mythology is sort of like ripe for the picking in terms of movie adaptations and other pop culture things?
I think we'll probably see a little uptick in like you know Greek adaptations or ancient, at least maybe not even just Greek, but just like sort of ancient text adaptations, or maybe just mythology in general.
Mm.
Because I think this shows that there's an appetite for it, even though this was obviously one that most of the others will not have. The IMAX fleet behind them, and the production crew and the budget. But I think it shows that some people will want to get on this and make some summer blockbusters like this. So I think if we look forward in a couple of years, we'll probably see a slightly more ancient mythology adaptation movies in the summer season than we have recently. Would be my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. I mean, yeah, this is my opportunity. Also, like I previously talked about it when we talked about Hades last year, but Epic the Musical, this came out sometime last year, I believe, and it's essentially just a musical version of the Odyssey, and that already, even a year before the film came out, had sort of amassed this cult following. There's an animated show in the works, so yeah, Odysseus fans will definitely have, I think, no shortage of new content, I think, in the coming months and years. Um, Another thing I do want to shout out too is Ubisoft, I believe, also called out that Assassin's Creed Odyssey had some sort of player spike as a result of
Yes.
interest because of the Odyssey. So yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see downstream effects of all this, similarly to when you see pirates, and it's all cyclical, and so yeah, ancient Greece is today's pirate movie, as it was in the mid 2000s. But yeah, great movie that is The Odyssey. Go see it if you haven't already. I wish I could go see it in IMAX 70 millimeter, but I just don't think I'm willing to go into the movie theater at 3 a.m. But God bless you if you are. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about Beast of Reincarnation. This episode is brought to you by Green Man Gaming. Right now, you can save up to an incredible 92% on hit titles like The Alters, Moonlighter 2, Frostpunk, and more during their 11-bit publisher sale. We've been huge fans of the types of games that 11-bit makes. We played The Alters last year. It was a very, very good game. We strongly recommend it. You can shop right now and support the show by clicking the link in the description. Don't wait too long though. The sale ends on August 4th. And we're back. Matthew, it's a special occasion for us because it's not very often that we get a original IP from Game Freak, the people that make Pokémon. But alas, that's what they've given us here with Beast of Reincarnation. This released earlier this month on August 4th. It's out on PlayStation, Xbox Series consoles. It's available through Game Pass as well, and it's also available on PC. This is so yeah, and just to give you like an idea of what it is, it's like an action soulsy, kind of action adventure RPG. But to give you guys a little bit of background, because when I mention Game Freak, obviously like we think of Pokemon, and but they've actually sort of institutionalized the idea of releasing new IP and constantly cultivating and incubating new ideas. So this is the Gear Project initiative internally at Game Freak, and so it's led them to release 13 titles that are from original IP over the course of their history since the release of the original Pokemon games. So you've got games like Drill Dozer, Tembo the Badass Elephant, Giga Wrecker, and Little Town Hero. So yeah, and that brings us to Beast of Reincarnation. Like I said, this is probably their most AAA attempt that they've done so far, right? Like this is done in Unreal Engine 5, so it's got the Unreal Engine lighting, the realistic textures, everything's really sort of dialed up to 11 visually here, especially compared to Game Freak's other games. And also it's kind of their spin on I'm going to say Souls light, but the game that I think I find myself comparing it a lot to in terms of the combat is Stellar Blade, or even something like Sekiro, but maybe not it's a lot more forgiving, I'd say, than Sekiro is. But sword combat, very focused on parrying your enemies. But what your parries do in Beast of Reincarnation is that it fills up a gauge that you then spend to use the abilities of your dog companion, who is named Ku. So you play as Emma and Ku in this post-apocalyptic futuristic version of Japan. And so yeah, as Emma, you're the swordsmith blocking everything that's coming your way, and then using the points that you generate from that to power up Ku, who can do all of these different attacks and has all these different magical abilities to sort of help you out in the heat of battle. Emma herself also has some powers. She's I'm not 100% clear on her lore and backstory, but she's an android. She doesn't have much of a soul, or she doesn't have any soul rather, but she's also has these blight powers that she can use to traverse and also help out during combat as well. So with that being said, we've both been playing it for varying amounts of times, but Matthew, you've been playing it a little bit longer than I have. What are your thoughts on Beast of Reincarnation based on what you've played so far?
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a strange one, and I mean that in a complimentary way. I think this is a game where if you start listing out all of the different aspects, like from a qualitative perspective, it doesn't sound very impressive. But I think, and for me, and I've heard from some other people as well, there's this pull about it that kind of keeps making you come back and wanting to play more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe, I think, the standout elements of it that to me, we're going to look past. We can talk about all the negatives and the things that could use some work, in detail later. But I think to kind of describe, I mean, to put it bluntly, I really like this game a lot. And for me, it comes down to basically three different things. One is the combat, like the action. And I don't just mean like the actual swinging of the sword. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach combat. Like you have your hair, like your hair can basically extend outwards to be like a ramp. So it gives you this almost like Spider-Man ability to kind of like get above like battles or enemies and then kind of like swoop down on them. Or maybe Batman is better. But I'm thinking of like in the Insomniac
stealth
Spider-Man
combat. Like there's a stealth element to it that I wasn't quite expecting because of that ability. And so yeah, it does give you a little bit like a surprising amount of latitude in combat.
Yes, and like ranged, you have a much more. A lot of these games don't really emphasize like your ranged combat, but in this you can use your bow and your crossbow, and you can upgrade them, and like you can become very formidable from a range, even before you get into sword combat. And we haven't even mentioned like there's also like a debuff system or a elements system. So there's like strengths and weaknesses.
Yep.
Kind of like a little bit like not as robust as Pokemon or anything like that, but it's just something that you don't usually see in a game like this. So it's blending these different uh action RPG elements that you've seen probably in other games, but it's doing it in a way that it's really hard to pin down exactly what it feels most like. I mean, you mentioned Sekiro, like,
Yeah.
yeah, there are definitely some moments when you can like sneak through some bushes or whatever and execute somebody, or when you parry enough blows, you get to execute them, you know, because you've like their posture meter or whatever is depleted. Like there are some moments that feels like Sekiro. But and then, you know, like I mentioned, there's like the Spider-Man comparison, and then, you know, and there's just like, I don't know, like Devil May Cry or something with the way the ranged guns
Yeah.
work. Like it's a interesting blend, and there's a lot of latitude with how it lets you play. And I think that has been really rewarding for me to kind of like, um, you know, just mess around with different things in the skill tree and see how they blend together and what possibilities they allow for. So that's been a lot of fun. And I think, you know, the second thing I'll say is really fun here is the world building, and the way that is conveyed with the visuals that you actually put out there. So this is not like the open world. It is intentionally feels kind of empty. Like this is not a game where you're gonna go out in the open world and you're going to, you know, find a bunch of side quests. Like there's maybe, I could probably count on one hand
And
the number of side quests that I've encountered in this game so far.
and the world itself isn't even open so much as they're like open-ish areas that are like more like bespoke. So you're going like you're hanging out in one area, doing a bunch of missions, and then you're leaving and going to another brand new area to fight the next boss. So it's not even open world either.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I would compare to like Final Fantasy 16 sort of
Yeah.
style.
Yeah.
Um, but while that game had like it like every little pocket on those maps had like a side quest or something, some it gave you some reason to go there, like from a quest perspective. Whereas
Mhm.
this, it's like there's a ton of hidden little alcoves where you can get items or, you know, like stuff to improve your weapons or whatever, resources. That it just does, like it does, the game doesn't really care if you go there or not. Like it's up to your own curiosity to explore the world. I'll say that there's one zone sort of towards the middle of the game where um you come across like, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's like you'll know it when you get to it. It's like the coolest visual thing that I'd seen in the game up to that point.
Mhm.
And you spend kind of this whole level getting to it, and then if you just stick to the main quest, like you're there for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and you don't even explore like 15% of this zone.
Yeah.
And so like I went through it, and there was just a ton of cool like level design, optional enemies, like mini boss style enemies, and just like world building through the art design in the game that I found like totally fascinating in a way that you just don't see many games doing that, where they will design all of this like, you know, a level like this and then not force you in some way, or even really like strongly incentivize you to go through it at all. Um, so the fact that it's kind of like making me choose what I want to do, and like, you know, whether I want to see more or something or not,
Mm.
it's really working for me.
That's interesting, and I mean, yeah, I'll caveat with the fact that I am not as far as you. I'm like in the fourth chapter of the game, and I'm having a really tough time with Beast of Reincarnation. I think, you know, going to the combat, like the combat is like competent, and like I am having a good enough time. I appreciate the fact that the parry windows are a little bit more generous because I'm not tuned for something like a Sekiro. And yeah, to echo what you just said here, like the world building and the universe is really what's drawing me in here, and I think that's what is pushing me to continue pushing through some of the gripes that I have with it. You know, I think the combat, while it's functional and I think it's good, I think there's some balancing issues And maybe that's just because I'm still unlocking that full toolkit of things, and maybe I'm just not implementing it or using it to its full potential here. But there are enemies that I'll run into that feel like pushovers, and then in the same sort of sequence, you'll have a guy that two shots you. And, it doesn't feel balanced in a way that a Souls game does, where it sort of coaches you to be on your toes at all times. Like, there's times where I feel like I can kind of button mash and BS my way through it, and then there's times where I'm like, wait, hold on, no, I need to lock in now. So it's a little bit of inconsistency there. And I think while the world and the world, like the stuff that they're like building toward is interesting and compelling, I think the way that it's delivered is just really falling flat for me. I think the characters themselves is, they're not very interesting. I think we can have a discussion about whether or not that's intentional. Obviously I mentioned like Emma, the protagonist, is a soulless person, so like there is a like a soullessness in her delivery, but I also think that makes it harder for me as the player to invest into her or anything that's really going on here. I think there's a Kojima quality to a lot of the cutscenes and the dialogue, where it's like you'll get one dialogue sequence and then like it'll cut to another scene where something else is happening, and I feel like their ambitions are really high, but they're not hitting the same level of writing that Kojima does. And I say that knowing that Kojima has his moments, but I think he has the very, very high highs, and I don't think Beast of Reincarnation is quite getting up to that level.
Yeah, I think the story and the characters are, again, it's they're not, it's not great. I'm not gonna mince words here. And quickly as an aside, I have taken to calling this Metal Gear Solid Cleanse Walker,
I love
because
that.
of, yeah. Um, the Cleanse Walker is kind of like your base of operations in the game, where it's literally like a two-legged like mech that you live inside. So it called the Cleanse Walker. So, but yeah, I think there are, like, the dialogue immediately like gave me just a terrible first impression of this game. And I think it's taken me some time. The dialogue never really improves, but there are like you say, it doesn't reach the high highs. As I've gotten further in, it has gotten to some moments where there are conversations where it's like, like, okay, they're doing something here. Like that wasn't completely stilted, or like this character is like showing an element of their personality actually, rather than just like saying like, oh, okay, or something like that. Like the number of times when they just like have like no substance to a line of dialogue is super high. And I really think part of this may come down to the way they've translated the Japanese into English, because I am playing this with English voiceovers. I don't know, but something doesn't quite work with the dialogue. However, perhaps counterintuitively, I do think the way that the dialogue comes across prevents it from having that like typical like anime archetype feeling for these characters. Like you can tell kind of what they fall into, but they don't go into stereotype for any of these characters, which I really appreciate. And yeah, like I'm a little bit further in than you. I think I'm getting close to the end of the game. The characters do open up, mostly. Some of the side characters you encounter like once, and they're made out to be like major characters, and you're like, you didn't do a good job establishing this character or why I care about them at all, sort of thing. But then yeah, you get to the story, which the story they keep teasing it along, like they're trickling it out in between these chapters. And it keeps reminding me of Lost, the way like the Lost TV show would keep stacking on more questions, but they wouldn't necessarily give you a lot of answers to shorter term things. Like it was all about the big mysteries, building. So I think at a more micro level, it doesn't work. There's not much good justification for why they're stringing the explanation of what's actually going on here along. But that hasn't stopped me from actually wanting to know and wanting to see what what that next plot beat is,
Mhm.
and in between all that, like we talked about, the action has been enough to keep pushing me through these levels and really enjoying it, even if I do wish there was more narrative built into each of the levels themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is a lot of that the story is being delivered, especially during the gameplay heavy sequences. It's just being delivered via dialogue through your like in-game communicator. And so it's just it feels like the story is being communicated toward you versus like you being a participant or you understanding the what's going on and the forces at play here. The other sort of gripe that I wanted to like air out is, and maybe I don't want to like at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I do think that while they are trying some cool and interesting things, there are some systems that ultimately feel like they're here and don't ever materialize. Now maybe you can speak to that that you're further in the game, but like there's a like cultivating mechanic where you can like cultivate your own food and craft and you have to manage your hunger, and like I never really felt that felt a necessary, but then b like I don't think like you get these little notifications that pop up that like when you and Ku are hungry, and I never felt like it negatively impacted me in any way, and so it felt like those systems were pretty superficial. Is there anything you can speak to as far as like the different gameplay systems here and what worked for you, or maybe something that missed the mark?
Yeah, I also the hunger system, when you're hungry, that means you no longer like auto regenerate health in between battles. That's the only like
Mm,
material way that impacts anything. Otherwise, like, it you're fine to be hungry. Like, you're not gonna die and starve or anything. You just don't regenerate health in between fights. Yeah, but I generally do agree. Like, the cooking and researching mechanics here feel like maybe they were like a bigger part of an earlier iteration of this game or something. Like, there are so many food recipes in this game,
yeah.
and I've done more probably than I needed to, and I don't think
Mhm.
I've not done a quarter of them all. Like, it
Oh
is it is
God.
crazy how many recipes you get over the course of this game. Um, and there's very little like to distinguish them. Like, it's
Yeah.
hard to see why
It seems
they
like they're trying to do the Monster Hunter thing where it's like, oh, this gives you a buff, but it's like, yeah, there's only like four stats. So there's only however many permutations of things that give you buffs in certain areas for different stats. That, yeah, I can't imagine there being this need for this robust of a recipe
yeah.
lineup.
Yeah, I wish like, and then there's the researching thing, which is like when you pick up a manual for something, it's got to be researched, but you don't ever
Mm,
have to assign the research to be done. It just happens in the background. So it's essentially like you pick up a book or whatever that tells you how to make something, and then it gets researched like maybe 15 minutes later with no interaction from you at all. It's like, why is that even a mechanic? Like, why are you putting that friction there? Like, that doesn't impact me at
right.
all. It's just like an extra menu basically. So I don't know. I feel like those maybe didn't get fleshed out the way they needed to be, or as the game evolved, they should have been scaled back to an appropriate level of depth rather than keeping
Hmm.
it the way they are. Um, but and yeah, I think, like, like planting things in your cleanse walker is kind of like, it's like a cool thing to do to make it feel more homey, because that is a theme, is like, the cleanse walker is your home. You get decorations for it, so like, in that regard, I feel like it's serving a purpose there. But from a purely mechanical perspective, I don't think, yeah, I would agree that those don't really have a huge you know significance.
Yeah, and all of this really, like, to me, it sort of goes back to that, like, the incubation process and how these games are sort of developed. And I can imagine this was developed with like an everything, but everything in the kitchen sink sort of mentality of like, let's just see what works. Um, So you can tell, like, there's very much things that do work and things that maybe if they get a chance to make a sequel, they can flesh out and improve upon while scaling back some of those other things. While we're on the topic of a sequel, right? Like, this game has come out, it's gotten pretty mixed reviews, not just you and I. Like, I think the general consensus seems to be like there is some positives to be found here if you're willing to deal with some frustrations and some rough edges. Do you want to see Game Freak make a theoretical Beast of Reincarnation 2?
I haven't seen the end of this yet, so I'm not sure how I would feel about them doing another one. I would like to see another stab at this like type of game from them. Whether it's the same characters or like, something else in the same universe or a similar universe, but just something in this framework. I would like to see, because I think there is, like I've talked about here, there's a lot that I do like about what they're doing here. There's just, if they can sort of focus in on the parts that work and cut down on the parts that don't, I feel like they could have something really special here. And going back to like kind of the reception here, I feel like this game does not make a good first impression. The opening of the game like jumps back and forth chronologically, both like in terms of timeline. It goes into the future and then it goes into the past. It tutorializes things weird. Like, it tries to give you tutorials for things that you would have already had to do in the previous level, like in order to proceed. And it just does not put its best foot forward at the beginning. I also don't feel like the first level in this game is very representative of the way that these levels typically flow overall. So, and it sounds like Game Freak knew that, and they're promising some changes to that to the early game experience. So we'll see what that actually comes out to. But I think between that and reviewers having to probably rush through the game to get the review out for the embargo, I don't know if that's the case. I'm guessing. I don't know how much time they had, but I feel like all that is to say that this game, I think it's best when you're taking your time with it and you're not trying to rush through and you're looking at the optional stuff that's there. And I don't think that, a lot of people either made it far enough in to do that or took the time to do that. And because I know I wouldn't be enjoying the game as much as I am if I was just sticking to the critical path and not, letting my curiosity take me off the beaten path. But I also realize that the world may not be as interesting for everybody. So to each their own in that regard.
Yeah, no, yeah. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind seeing them take another stab at it. And especially, this is obviously a company that is buoyed by Pokemon and the success of, they've essentially got a money printer over there, right? So they're kind of always going to have the ability, at least, in the short term, to continually incubate and try new things. So I think it would be foolish to throw all of this stuff away, because I think going back to the general consensus is that there's good stuff here. Like, I think there's some good ideas here. So it would be, I think, silly for them to scrap all of that and then just try something brand new with whatever comes next from this incubation team. Before we move on to Fields of Mistria, Matthew, one thing that you noted and pointed out as far as Beast of Reincarnation is concerned, but also a sort of larger trend in the games industry, is that this year has seen a lot of AAA high-profile games launch not at $70, but at $60. So in addition to Beast of Reincarnation, we had Pragmata that came out earlier this year. Control Resonant is going to be a $60 game. Phantom Blade Zero, which is coming out in October, will also be $60. In the year of our Lord 2026, where we were getting $100 GTA, it seems like the trend is that games are getting more expensive. But do you think that this signifies that that may not be the case?
Yeah, I think these games that you mentioned that are at the $60 price point, I think what they have in common is that they're single player only, and they were maybe not made with a budget that was comparable to some other, like what you would consider like the major AAA titles, like the Grand Theft Autos or like Call of Duty or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it's in particular, we can't speak to Control Resident or Phantom Blade Zero quite yet, but I think what Beast of Reincarnation has in common with Pragmata, and we talked about this when we talked about Pragmata earlier in the year, is that these are kind of experimental. Obviously, in Game Freak's case, this was like kind of like a side project for them, but um, Pragmata as well. Like they try something different than what the studio is both known for and what's common in their genre. So they're like a little more experimental, a little riskier. Maybe
Mhm.
these studios don't feel like they can charge $70 for something that is like untested like that. Um, it's the kind of game that you would get. We talked like we would get more games like this back in like the 360 or PS3 era. Where they're like weird games that come out, they try something new. Maybe they're great, maybe they're not, but they don't ever get a sequel, and they kind of become like hidden gems for the fans of the
Yeah.
genre, which I think Pragmata fits that bill pretty well. And I think, honestly, I think Beast of Reincarnation will, I don't know if it'd be considered like a cult classic, but I think it will be, somebody's gonna be like, hey, you remember, like, did anybody ever play this game? Like, this is actually kind of good, for fans of that kind of thing. So,
Everyone's got those obscure like PS3 games that they yeah, like won't stop talking about. So yeah, I'm sure this is
exactly.
somebody's obscure PS3 game that they won't stop talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to I think how those publishers are managing those games. Obviously, like you said, we're still TBD on a couple of those, but I think Capcom has been very wise in how they've managed the budgets of these games and understanding what the asking price, like the ideal asking price is, and not necessarily just assuming that because it equals AAA, quote unquote, that it's going to equal $70. So yeah, I mean, I think, these are things that we've sort of talked about and touched on, over the years. And I think these are the kinds of games that, you want to see. And I think, we've talked about Xbox, and Xbox has been a big story in games this year with that sort of failed push into Game Pass. But I think that's one of, in my opinion, the like enduring legacies of of Game Pass is that it sort of brought back and revitalized, or sort of um this like the mid-tier game, where I think is, maybe the budgets for those weren't handled well, and that's why you see what's happening at Xbox. But I think if people can finance those types of experience in smart ways to where they're not as big of a risk, I think you will continue to see games like that continue to get made. And I think you'll see people continue to buy them because, Pragmata has sold really, really well. I imagine Control Resonant is going to sell really well. So I think as long as the quality is there, and I think if there's enough built into the budget of these games to sort of offset the risks so that you're not laying off an entire team, I think being able to take risks like this is a good thing.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I know I've talked about this before, but this is the kind of game that we want to see, right? We want the riskier games. Maybe they don't have as big a budget, but we want something new. We want people trying something new, see what catches on, rather than just churning out the same thing again and again and again. And so, even if this game doesn't work for everybody, even though it does work for me, like I hope they continue to like make new things, not just Game Freak, but everybody else. I hope they see that people are trying things like this, maybe at that $60 price point. And maybe not all of them will be for me, but I want people to continue making these for somebody.
That's or not Fields of Mistria. That's Beast of Reincarnation. Go play it now. It's out everywhere. Speaking of Fields of Mistria, let's talk about it because it is out in 1.0. This released the day after Beast of Reincarnation on August 5th, released previously in early access, just actually 2 years ago on the date, August 5th, 2024. This is independently developed and published by NPC Studio, PC only, and the elevator pitch is it's Stardew Valley, but what if it was anime? And that's a great place to start, right? Because I think that's I think it's easy to look at this game and say like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a Stardew Valley clone. It's a Stardew Valley knockoff. The only other thing that you'll sort of notice is that, yeah, it's heavily anime inspired. If you're familiar with the Sailor Moon anime, like it's very inspired by that mid to late 90s style of anime. And yeah, I mean, to sort of give you the rundown on it, if you're not familiar with it, it's a farming simulator. So, if you're not familiar with that core loop, right? Like you're moving into an abandoned house, you're starting a farm, you're growing crops, you're meeting the locals. Newer versions of these games have you exploring some type of dungeon and fighting, some level of combat in there. You're upgrading and buying new things for your farm, livestock, things like that. So this is basically that, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Fields of Mistria is like some sort of revelatory release here for the farming simulator genre, but what it does is that it so seamlessly streamlines it feels like every design decision about this game was made in reaction to a pain point that someone felt when they were playing Stardew or playing other farming simulators in the past, right? So I think that's inherently divisive, right? Like I think people who may be Stardew purists may look at that and say like, oh, you've removed all of the friction, you've made it so that you don't have to, I guess I'll give you like sort of the laundry list of things, right? Like, there's things like the villagers are always appear on the map, right? So you never have to guess where they are, you never have to learn their routines. They're always just kind of, it's always there, like where they are, you always know where to go to find them. The stores open 24/7. You can walk in and just hit a kiosk, you can buy whatever you need whenever you need it. You're not limited to store hours, so everything's really designed around like, if there's something you want to do, we're not going to prevent you from doing it. And you're constantly feeding into these different upgrade paths, and you're leveling up different skills. Really what I would say, like the one thing that the game does that I think that differentiates itself from Stardew Valley is that it is more of an RPG in ways where Stardew Valley is more like a simulator, where it is about setting up automations and setting up things, your farm to run optimally, where Fields of Mistria is more about like that feeling of leveling up your character and getting better and more efficient and stronger that way. So I think it's different strokes for different folks there. I lean more toward the Fields of Mistria model and just making it more of an RPG, and just because of how impatient of a gamer I can be sometimes, I do appreciate how streamlined some of these things are, and everything feeds into one another, I think, really really well. Like going back to our conversation about Beast of Reincarnation, I don't think there's any systems in here that feel superfluous or that don't have like an impact. Everything feeds into each other really, really nicely. And so, yeah, I'm about 24, 25 hours in. I didn't play much during the early access release. I knew I was going to be sucked into this as soon as it came out. So I've put most of that time in 1.0. So I'm almost done with my first full year. And yeah, I've got no intention of slowing down.
Yeah, I actually, this is in our my Steam family library, so I almost booted this up. I probably would have if I had a like a platform at the time where I was able to run it. It doesn't run on Macs, which is what I had my Mac laptop with me at the time. Um, but yeah, I mean, I am not usually a big farming sim game, but this one has caught my eye. I heard really good things about this throughout the early access. Um, I think the frictionless design is interesting here because at some point, how much friction can you remove before you lose what, like there's an optimal level of friction for a lot of people, and it's different
Right.
for everybody, but there's got to be something for you to engage with, in order to keep making it interesting for you to come back. But what I have heard good things about in this game is the cast of characters in the
Yeah.
town. Talk a little bit about like how they stack up and what you think about them compared to something like Stardew.
First of all, they are all hot as fuck. Like unreasonably hot. Like I have no idea why or who but like thank God they decided to make them as hot as they are. But I mean, yeah, like all jokes aside, I mean, yeah, the character art very horny. Everyone has very different outfits. It's great. But you know, beyond that, I do think the writing is really well done. You know, the characters are very charming. I think they play outside of the traditional stereotypes that you see in these kinds of games. So, you know, you've got like a witch who, you know, like sort of like a witchy, you know, alternative goth mommy who, you know, like she lives out in the woods and like, you know, like does like witchy things. You know, and you have like, you know, another thing too is that Mistria itself is set in a more fantasy style world. So, you know, there are like elements of like, you know, there's like royalty, it seems, and you know, everything is sort of like presented like almost like in a Bridgerton kind of way where it's like
Yeah.
very like regal and elegant. But then of course, you know, you do have like common, you know, like townsfolk and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think the cast of characters, I wouldn't say that it's better because I think there is something to having to memorize like their, you know, like routines and get to know, you know, getting to know them like on a weird stalker level that endears you to those Stardew Valley characters. But from what I've seen in my more limited time with Fields of Mistria, like I think this is a cast of characters that I could easily see myself falling into a same situation for. And another thing too that I'll mention is that, you know, with regards to the design, is that it's really designed in a way that's like avoiding you having to make the spreadsheet to track everything, where, you know, kind of like to the point that you were making before, some people find the joy in finding the spreadsheet. So if you're a
Right.
Stardew spreadsheet girly, like this may not be the game for you. But if that is something that you're like, oh man, like I hate having to look up X, Y, and Z in the wiki, like that's really where Fields of Mystery I think is strongest.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I may end up checking this out. My next question, so you kind of touched on the fact that this is not really breaking new ground. And you mentioned that like maybe what you feel like is the more RPG element of it. Like, where would you like talk to me about what you want more, like more specifically what you'd want to see in that area? Like, what elevates this, and how could it, like, you know, in post release content, how could they take it even further?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think really for me the first point was when I was going through the mines, right? Like, and you know, if you're familiar with Stardew Valley, you're familiar with the concept of the way, you know, the way that the mines work. And it works the exact same way in Mistria, but I think Mistria, like when I got to the 20th floor, which is kind of like your first major milestone in terms of like what the quests ask you to do, you start getting story, you know, elements. And so, you know, I think I've been a little bit more head down and like focused on like the work side of things for a while. So it hasn't been as prevalent, but what I'm hoping for is that in the yeah, like the mid to late game, you do see more of the like what's going on. Like you get the sense that there's like some mystical forces going on. I say all of this and like the story is very much what you would expect from one of these games, you know, like the town has fallen on hard times. We gotta, you know, improve the town and the sort of surrounding area to, you know, restore it to its former glory, stuff like that. So it's not particularly deep in terms of the story, but I think in the areas where you expect it to like play it safest in terms of sticking to the formula, they do start to branch out. So yeah, in terms of looking, you know, forward and hopefully later on, I hope that there's more, you know, story stuff.
Well, cool. Yeah, I'll be curious to see how you feel about it as it progresses. But
Yeah.
it's good to see that this is such a you know, well received title, and that, you know, the farming sim genre, even if it's not, you know, being reinvented, there's still plenty of room to do it in, you know, satisfying in new ways in their own way.
Yeah. Am going to stop shy of saying that Fields of Mistria is the new undisputed king of farming sims, but the only two things that I would say are holding it back at least as it relates to Stardew Valley, which I do still consider the Undisputed King, is that Fields of Mistria is locked to PC, so even though it's out in 1.0, there's no console release yet. They're working on it. It should be coming out in the near future. And that Stardew Valley does have that ability to play multiplayer that Fields of Mistria doesn't have. Not blaming them, but if you are looking for features, use cases or arguments for one over the other, Stardew Valley is still kind of the ultimate quote unquote version. But I think Fields of Mistria, like I said, if you're somebody who, doesn't enjoy the elements of Stardew Valley that are more tedious, I think this is one that you'll enjoy, and the art style and everything is just so charming. So yeah, I'm going to spend quite a few more hours playing it, but I will not spend much more time talking with you lovely folks. We're going to log off for tonight, but we want to thank you guys for hanging out with us and chatting with us. Just as a reminder, you can listen to past episodes. Find us on your social network of choice at timekillerspod.com. Don't forget to send us your hot takes or let us know whatever you're killing time with at ask.timekillerspod.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform that you listen to podcasts on and leave us a review. Let us know how much you love us. But with that being said, we are going to sign off. We'll see you on the next one.